if you put it in there, it won't go. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I think of this time of year, the end of August, the beginning of September, as the velvet season. It's about a 3-week period in which all those lovely, rich, velvety colours, the deep reds and purples and oranges and burnt ochres and umbers shine and glow. And that's something to do with the angle of the sun at this time of year, and also to do with the plants that thrive best after a long summer and before the cold weather comes. So you have this lovely period of a few weeks when the garden seems to have an extra lustre. This week, Carol looks at plant combinations at a prairie garden in Sussex.
How about this for a magnificent plant association? It's got all the elements you expect to see in a quintessential prairie planting.
And James Wong investigates a new take on growing your own at Bristol Zoo.
Here you go, boys. Got what you've been waiting for. You like chicory much more than I do.
The swallows and house martins are busy. That's a sign of the season, too. And, you know, it's bank holiday weekend, school starts next week. It's a new term. New term for gardeners, as well as all of us. Lots to do to prepare for autumn and even next spring and summer beyond. The dry garden hasn't really liked this summer. It looked fine until about mid-July. But because May and June, and a lot of July, were cold, a lot of the plants didn't really prosper. However, there have been stars, and amongst them were these Verbascum olympicum, which for weeks in midsummer stood tall with a blaze of yellow flower, and they were fantastic. But now they've done their stuff. And they are short-lived perennials, best treated as a biennial. A biennial develops its foliage and roots in the first season, and then the following year grows further and will flower in spring and summer, set seed and die. So if I plant mature plants now that will flower next year, that will be great. Whereas if I just sow seed now, collect the seed from this and sow it, I won't see any of those flowers until 2017. So I want to plant a replacement batch. So I'll cut these back. Now I could keep that seed, so I'll hold on to the tops there. Now this is Verbascum Gainsborough. And if I take it out of the pot, you'll see there's quite a good root system. It's quite a substantial plant, and of course it needs that to support such a tall spike. One of the interesting things about Verbascums is they flower best in really poor soil. They don't like rich, deeply dug, composted borders. Waste ground, stony ground, hot baking conditions, that's where they're happiest. So a dry garden is perfect. For some autumn colour, I'm going to plant a bulb now which should flower in October. This is Sternbergia lutea. It's actually a member of the Amaryllis family, related to daffodils, and looks a bit like a daffodil bulb. In order to flower, it needs a summer baking. So always put them somewhere maximum sun, maximum protection, and where there's some warmth that can be reflected off the ground or the wall. They also need really good drainage. That's a little group planted there. I'll plant another couple of little groups around the other Verbascums. They will definitely flower this autumn. Whether they flower next year depends a lot on the weather this October, November, and even December. I have here a very particular style of gardening in these dry borders. The soil and the situation determines that. But of course you can apply a style of gardening by choosing your plants and how you grow them, regardless of your conditions. And Carol has been to Sussex to see a garden where plants have been chosen and combined to achieve a very particular effect.
I'm looking at the wonderful ways gardeners are putting plants together. From wild and naturalistic planting to fabulous and formal, and exotic feasts for the eyes. Today I'm looking at a style of planting that's reminiscent of the wild American plains, but has its roots in Germany, where it started in an attempt to find a solution to planting up parkland in a truly modern way. In Germany, prairie planting was pioneered as an ecological solution to managing municipal parkland. They used robust plants found on the American prairies and hybridized them, creating tough varieties that were low maintenance, had a long flowering season, and provided a habitat for bird and insect life. How about this for a magnificent plant association? It's got all the elements you expect to see in a quintessential prairie planting. Huge swathes of perennials, great ribbons of grasses, and all close together but planted generously. This is typical, this Helenium, of prairie plants. It's got a German name and was probably developed there. It's called Rubenkupel, but its ancestors frequented those plains, those prairies. And it's glorious with this big miscanthus running behind. And the whole thing is backed by this Eupatorium. It's Eupatorium maculatum. And I love the way in which those heads, the shape of those heads, almost cauliflower-like, is mirrored in this sedum that runs right along the base. It's absolutely beautiful. Pauline and Paul McBride built their garden on inherited farmland in 2008 and, with the help of family and friends, planted up 8 acres with more than 30,000 plants. Within 3 years, this garden was putting on a spectacular show. What's the secret, Pauline, of actually managing to keep these things upright? I mean, everything's done into attention.
Well, the big secret, I think, is the fact that it's in a very open space. They've got full sun, they've got light, and they've got their friends around them, of course. And every March time, they're growing up in quite a strong wind, actually, which gives them stronger roots because they've got to struggle to survive.
Looking around, you're very aware of the fact that plants are happy. Nothing's elbowing its neighbours out of the way, you know, everybody seems to get on well.
They do. Most of them are finding their own space and their own relationship with their partners.
One of the most important elements in any prairie planting are grasses. In the background is this delightful Calamagrostis. It's Carl Forster. And he was the German grower who popularised grasses and introduced so many wonderful ones that we can grow in our gardens. In complete contrast is this delightful Descampsia, a form of the wavy hair grass. They're both quite different, but they both do what only grasses can do. They move so beautifully in the wind. They're a perfect contrast to these big clumps of perennials. Things like Calamaris, lovely daisies, or even the phlox in the background that you can glimpse through those waving stems, right the way through to these stiff spikes of the Liatris, so proud in the foreground of this beautiful planting. Prairie planting is an easy-going sort of discipline. Here's a perfect example. The Echinacea, both white and pink, have been planted deliberately for this corner. But into them has seeded this Verbascum Chakesii album. It's the perfect match. It's actually got pink and white flowers. But if you accept that whole principle that you can allow plants to do wonderful things, then you get all sorts of exciting effects. One of the principles of prairie planting is always to choose plants that are going to love the conditions you can give them. Secondly, think of the spirit of the prairies. Try and recreate it by planting in as large numbers as you possibly can. Abandon your inhibitions. And thirdly, exult in the opportunity to give these boisterous plants the chance to be themselves.
Sussex Prairie Gardens are an RHS partner garden, and you can go along and visit them. If you go to our website, you'll get the details of when they're open and how to get there. And my own grass borders here at Longmeadow are one of my favourite parts of the garden. I often come here and stand and look and importantly listen, because of course grasses make the most wonderful sound. And what I particularly love about them is the combination of structure, the real sense of volume and substance, with lightness of touch and elegance, and no other planting does that. And of course, you can add colour. We've got Niphophis ruperi, which is flowering at the moment really vibrantly. And even when Niphophis aren't flowering, the foliage, this is Uvaria, works in brilliantly well with grasses. And one tip, if you're not used to growing grasses, start out with Miscanthus. They're very adaptable, easy to grow, and they look fantastic. Now, it's been a strange year for vegetables. Some have been fine. Lettuces, peas, any of the hardier vegetables have been good. But some of the more tender ones really haven't liked it, and this has been a bad tomato year for me. A low volume crop, very slow ripening. We've been eating them for about 6 weeks, but the taste is not good at all. And I put that down to low temperatures. And one of the things that I've had a lot of are split fruit. If you've had split fruit, the reason is twofold. It's either irregular, erratic watering, which is your fault, or irregular temperature, and there's not much you can do about that. And here we've had some very cold days, even colder nights, right through June, July, August, and that's what's done the damage. And if you're growing tomatoes indoors and they're reaching the ceiling now, cut them off. There is a point where you have to just accept what you've got and try and make it as good as possible. And I think tomatoes respond to that very much because the days are getting shorter, they're getting cooler. These tomatoes will ripen slower and slower. And you can see we've got quite a few green ones. And to get the best from them, you need to concentrate the energy. And by the way, you can defoliate them as much as you like. These will ripen perfectly well with no leaves on at all. Don't overdo the watering at this time of year. Water at most just once a week, but you can feed them. And if you water and feed at the same time with a liquid feed, that will be adequate. An awful lot of people grow tomatoes, well or otherwise, and they're one of the most popular vegetables, albeit being a fruit, that there are. But I guess not so many people grow turnips. They're not a sexy vegetable. That's a shame, because turnips can be really delicious, and it's not too late to sow some now. And then you can harvest them later in autumn, through winter and into next spring. I've got snowball, and I'm going to sow this patch of ground where peas were before. And I just plant them in rows. I use boards always because they're easy to tread on as well as give a spacing. So make a rill along the edge of a board or a string. And the secret of enjoying turnips is not to eat them too big. Pull them when they're golf ball size. Then you cook them whole, add a little bit of butter to the pan, glaze them, maybe a touch of sugar to caramelize them, and they're absolutely delicious. They have a real sweetness and that slight cabbagey tang, which doesn't sound great, but actually adds texture to them. They're lovely. And if you're used to growing vegetables, you'll recognize the seed as being quite similar to rocket, to cabbage. They're brassicas. and they're part of that family. And brassicas normally come after legumes in rotation because they use the nitrogen that's left in the soil from peas and beans. I have peas here, so this is perfect. Sow them very thinly. However thinly you sow, they will need thinning. It's a good idea to try and thin turnips, swedes, beetroot, any of these root crops evenly. That's the key to it. So you get nice, even growth. And really, as soon as they're big enough to handle, just go along and just pick out every other one or every few. And although that seems quite wasteful, you'll get a much better quality of vegetable as a result. Just cover the rows lightly to protect them. And then, of course, always label and mark where you've sown. Not least so that if weeds grow, you'll know that a line of fresh young seedlings are your turnips, whereas rather more erratic seedlings are going to be weeds, and you can weed them from day one. Those will germinate and grow. They'll be quite small as they go into autumn, but they're hardy. And they will stand throughout winter. You can harvest them as you need them, just pulling them from the soil right through into next spring. No trouble at all. That's easy. I'm pretty sure that I'll be successful with my turnips, but I haven't been quite so successful with my grapes. My initial problems with grapes were caused by blackbirds getting in and eating them all overnight. When I say all, they ate all the ripe ones. So I left the green ones to ripen, and the wasps have found them. And boy, do they love a grape. They're completely obsessed by it. They're in a great frenzy, hundreds of the things. And of course, it makes it really difficult to harvest them. Probably pick 6 bunches in all, and that's it. So it's been a fairly steep learning curve. I'm not quite sure how to keep wasps out, but I will work on it. So next year, I try and keep them long enough so we can eat them, rather than feeding them to either blackbirds or wasps. Now, it's one thing to lose fruit and veg to wasps or blackbirds or pigeons or slugs, but quite another if you're growing specifically to feed to wild animals. And James Wong went along to Bristol Zoo to see how not only do they care for the occupants, but also how they feed them.
Not only do gardeners at zoos create amazing enclosures like this, using plants to provide shade and shelter, which encourages natural behavior, here at Bristol Zoo, they're also enriching the animals' lives by growing their own food. With everything from flamingos to western lowland gorillas and invertebrates too, homegrown extras ensure the animals have a full and varied diet.
It's the things that we can't get hold of very easily that we'll try to grow here. And particularly specialist things for animals, that perhaps the chicory for giant tortoise, to make sure that there's high levels of protein in that diet and in that particular type of food.
How do you decide what you're going to feed them? Do you have a meal plan?
Well, there is a list that the animal staff will send up to the nursery.
You've got effectively a shopping list of what they're being fed.
There. Yes, absolutely.
By animal. Red panda, 20 branches of bamboo. I love that.
It adds to the welfare of the animals, enriching their diet, making sure that they're healthy and keep well.
With that shopping list in mind, I've come to meet head horticulturist Eddie Mole to help him gather up some food from the zoo's nursery site, Wild Place. Eddie, I wondered what a giant animal allotment would look like, and, well, just like every other allotment, what are you picking?
Well, this is chicory for the giant tortoises.
So this isn't chicory as you'd recognise it from a greengrocer's. We normally would grow it for young, tender shoots.
That's right.
And this is way past flowering, absolutely covered with thick, fibrous growth.
This would be last year's crop that we've just left there, and this is the second year of use, really.
More fibre, potentially more nutrients, better for animals.
They love it. What we're trying to do is enrich the diet of the animals, so therefore a little bit of a lot of different things, all freshly produced.
Goodness me, radicchio, Thai basil I've seen, chard.
Yeah.
You've got such a jungle of sunflowers here.
Yeah.
What eats these?
Parrots and birds and lots of things like eating the seeds and picking the seed heads out.
There's some amazing stuff I've seen kicking around here, some of my favourite tropical plants. You guys are famous for having the national collection of Hedychium ginger lilies.
Yes. And I think, although primarily we grow them as a garden plant and as a plant heritage collection, they're a really useful landscape plant in the zoo to make things look tropical. But they're also a fodder plant because under glass and under cover they have their leaves all year round. It doesn't affect the plant because they're rhizomes, so they just shoot again, providing we don't crop them too heavily.
So it's secondary use for if you're doing pruning, instead of having to compost it, you can enrich animals' diets.
It is, yeah. Incredibly useful plant, really.
Wheelbarrow full, it's feeding time at the zoo. Here you go, boys. Got what you've been waiting for. You like chicory much more than I do. Right, I'm cornered and running out of food, so I'll leave you guys to it. Ryan, gorilla food, bamboo and maize. There you go, you're welcome. Well, it's the last stop on the feeding trail. I've got some drill monkeys to tend to, and I've got some Hedychium here and some spent sunflower heads for them. It's so weird to be on the other side of the glass.
Yes, yeah, not many people get to see this.
Yeah, what a privilege.
We try and spread it far and wide, you know, but we want to make sure that everyone gets their fair share.
I know all of these plants as, like, common garden plants. You'd never think that you'd be growing this for animal feed.
Oh, they love all of it. Anything that's different. They'll spend ages picking through the sunflower heads. It keeps them stimulated, and obviously it's good for them.
Well, that's really nice, isn't it? You cut down the national collection of Hedychium to feed to zoo animals, and we'll eat everything else. There's one up there with a stand of corn. There's a big guy over here coming up with some sunflower spent heads. You know, maybe there's...
Oh, look. Who needs a zoo when you've got frogs on your hedges? Perhaps I should be glad that it's wasps and frogs and pigeons, and not monkeys eating my garden. Now, what's attacking my box plants is a fungus, box blight. And a few weeks ago, I had a visit from the RHS to give me advice on how to deal with it, because there are many conflicting views and approaches. The good news is that the situation is recoverable. It's not a death sentence. The bad news is that it might need major surgery to get back to having the hedges and topiary looking half decent. So what I'm going to do is take all these hedges back by half, and it's hedge cutting season. So even if you haven't got box blight and you don't need to do remedial hedge cutting, now is the time to give your hedges a trim. If you want a level top to the hedge, it's always useful to have a guide. String stretched between bamboo canes is a good way to establish the line, and a spirit level will get accuracy. When you're doing any kind of hedge cutting, make sure you use an implement, whether it be mechanical or by hand, that is comfortably capable of doing the job. Don't strain, because that way you lose control and can have accidents. Make sure the top is narrower than the bottom. This is called establishing a batter, which is essentially a slope so that the bottom of the hedge gets plenty of light. I'm removing the thicker stems with secateurs to make sure there is no dead wood and maximum light can reach the new shoots. There are two things I have to do now. The first is to disinfect any implements I use. This is simply a spray of disinfectant. If you're really worried about spreading blight, don't use the same shears, hedge cutters, secateurs, whatever it might be, on blight and non-blight affected material. Keep them completely separate. All I'm doing is a little bit of basic hygiene. And then the second thing is to clear up scrupulously. Every scrap, put it into a barrow, or if you're worried about it blowing around, into bags, and then either burn it or bin it. And by binning it, seal it in bags and have it taken away. And then let's hope. And I feel in my bones that this may come good. Okay, this is a big job. It's going to take me more than just this weekend to do it. But here are some other things you can do and finish this weekend. Now is the last chance to sow salad crops for winter and early spring harvesting. Choose the varieties carefully, such as Mitsuna, Mibuna, Langcress, Rocket, or winter varieties of lettuce. Sow them thinly in a seed tray, water them either from above or below, and put them somewhere protected, although they don't need heat to germinate. And then prick them out as soon as they're ready and you have space available. If you've grown wallflowers from seed, or you've bought young seedlings, it's a good idea to pinch out the growing tips. This will encourage side shoots to develop, so that when you plant them out in a month or 6 weeks' time, they will be strong, bushy plants. Over the next few weeks is the ideal time to take cuttings from evergreen hedging plants, such as box or yew. And yew is surprisingly easy to take. Choose strong, healthy growth and pull off the side shoots so that they have a heel attached. Strip off the lower leaves and use a very free-draining compost, pushing the cuttings in against the edge of the pot. Put them somewhere protected, but it can be outside. Water them and then leave them to root, and this may well take 6 to 9 months. It's strange, you think of figs being part of a baking Mediterranean summer and that you need a hot summer for them to ripen. Not true, actually. This has been a cold, rather grey summer, and yet the figs are fantastic and ripening fast. This is a variety called brown turkey, and you can tell when they're ripe because they hang down. And if you just put your finger there and lift it up, it comes away in your hand. And that is ripe and ready to eat. I like them raw like this. Can't beat them. Try a bit of fig? Not sure he likes it. Oh well, all the more for those that do. That's it for today. I'll see you next month in September. There's a thought. But it's only next Friday. Till then, bye-bye.